I've seen all the economists' reaction about, oh, it's the market, and this really making America great again? Look, the market's down 3% in pre-open, whatever today or whatever it's at. There is no alternative. We move pharmaceutical manufacturing back to the United States, or grandma runs out of life-saving drugs when we get into a crisis or conflict with China, or when there's another a trade war, or when there's another pandemic lockdown, whatever, or any kind of geopolitical instability. We move all these critical manufacturing industries back to the United States, or we run out of stuff when the world shuts down. And so, and not only that, but as someone said in the chat, and your kids and your grandkids don't have jobs because they've all been exported. Just briefly, this goes back to mercantilism, and Michael Every over at Rabobank gets a ton of credit for I think he gets all the credit for being the first person to point this out. We are moving back to a mercantilist system where, and just briefly, the mercantilist system, we can go back just a couple hundred years ago and look at Europe. And let's say England and France are doing business, and England is spending its silver on French goods. Okay, so we have French goods coming into England, and we have English silver going into France. Well, if there's a large trade imbalance, or if trade is one way, and the French are not buying English goods, so they're not sending silver to England in exchange for English goods, what happens is England spends down its silver treasury, and France, which is not buying anything from England, is building up their treasury. They use that money to build their military, to hire mercenaries. And so a trade imbalance like this in a mercantilist system is a national security concern, because essentially England is financing the growth of the French military. Now let's apply that to the last 50 years, or last 20, 30, 50 years between the United States and China. We've had a massive and growing trade imbalance with China. We're sending American dollars to China. China is not reciprocating. They didn't meet that. They didn't meet the during the first Trump term. They didn't meet their end of the bargain by ramping up purchases of U.S. goods. And so we're sending good American dollars to China, which China is using to finance the growth of its military. And in addition to stealing technology and all these other things that they're doing. So this is not just national security. This is an existential crisis for the United States, because what Michael Every has pointed out correctly is that when you spend your cash, or your modern day equivalent of silver, which for us would be dollars, you become poor as a country. When no one buys your goods and you're buying everyone else's goods, you're exporting all your jobs. Eventually you're going to run out of jobs. You're going to run out of money. You're going to run out of industry, and you're going to be poor and broke. And this is what the Trump administration is trying to solve. I don't think the Trump administration has done a good enough job of explaining this, but this is effectively what's happening. There is no other alternative. We are going to pay some higher prices in the short term. In the long term, if the Trump administration can make this work, your kids and grandkids are going to have jobs. We're going to be able to produce the critical materials and products that we need here in America. And we're not going to be as heavily reliant on adversaries like China. We really should stop financing the growth of China's military. And this is what this whole thing is all about. This actually is a fundamental restructuring of global trade. And that's what's happening. And it's going to be difficult in the long term. I mean, I was saying that late last year. In the near term, it's going to be difficult. Maybe after the midterms, or maybe after getting close to the 28 elections, I'm somewhat optimistic that things are going to be much better. But this year, it's going to be quite difficult.